inspiration, motivation, and encouragement is brewing. Welcome to the Tea Time with Tan podcast, where you experience innovative solutions and creative ideas designed for your colossal dream success. Let's sit. Here's your host, Tan.
Hello, and thank you so much for listening. This is your host, Tan Tate. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's been following me at Spreaker.com, and I just want to say thank you. I'm continuing the series, Forgiveness. So I'm going to give you a moment to gather your thoughts and get into a safe place and space where you can receive the tea for today. My formatting is a little different today. Recently, as recent and probably within the last hour, I happened to watch one of my favorite movies, which is Pay It Forward. And if you've never seen the movie or you don't know about the movie, right now it's currently showing on Netflix. And I would highly recommend you would go see it. The movie was very powerful for me when I initially saw it many years ago. Just the message and the scope of the movie was just powerful. You know, it's all about pay it forward. In our current day and times, you may go to a Starbucks and the person in front of you may have already paid for your beverage drink, and then you may in turn do it for the person behind you. I know during back to school times, I see people usually buying school supplies for individuals, donating tennis shoes and things like that. So I know that we live in a society where we pay it forward. And that's a good thing because that is how it's supposed to be. And I believe that's why the movie resonated with me so much the way that it did when I initially watched it years ago. Well, tonight was my first time watching it since my daughter's death. And I don't want to spoil the movie for those of you who don't know or have not seen the movie. But a tragedy does take place in the movie. And you probably can tell by my voice that it really kind of hit home with me. Normally this time of the year is very challenging for me. My daughter's birthday is coming up on November 11th. Then we get into the holidays. And this is usually a very challenging time of the year for me. But I want to tell you what makes it a little easier for me. And that is my ability to forgive. So I don't know who's listening or who I'm talking directly to, but someone has been struggling with forgiveness. I want to remind you something that we talked about in the previous episodes, that forgiveness, when you look at the word, break it down into two words and know that the for is for you. And the give is what we give to someone else. Because oftentimes people may not necessarily warrant our forgiveness. But to forgive, it is for you. And when you don't forgive, you deprive yourself out of healthiness. I know I mentioned that before. And I want to talk a little bit about the movie and how forgiveness played a role into that, and how we can miss out on what we need if we cannot forgive. As the movie goes on, there's a scene where one of the stars, the leading characters, makes a decision that impacts someone else. And that person leaves. That person is hurt and that person is distraught. Excuse me a moment. The person leaves and they are distraught. They're hurt. And the leading character in the movie realizes that, they made a mistake. And they want to be forgiven. And the person that they hurt is like, no. You knew what you were doing. You made an intelligent decision. No. And then someone goes and intercedes and says, you gave me a set of instructions, and that's what I did. You told me to change the world, and that's what I'm trying to do. And here my mom wants you to forgive her, and you won't. She realizes she made a mistake, and you won't forgive her. Now, as the movie goes on, the individual does forgive the leading character, and they are able to reconcile. And then tragedy strikes, and because they were able to reconcile, because they were able to forgive, when the tragedy strikes, they're able to be there for one another. So I'm showing you a benefit of forgiveness. Now, oftentimes, because you forgive doesn't mean that you're going to always reconcile with an individual. But more times than none, you are able to reconcile. And in that reconciliation, when another storm arises, you have one another. So that's point one. You want to forgive. It's important to forgive because you don't know what's on the other side of that forgiveness. And you don't want to get to the other side and you need someone. And they're not there because unforgiveness set in. So I'm pretty much begging you to become a forgiver. It's for you. It's for your benefit. A couple of years ago, I had to have emergency surgery. They told me it was only going to be an outpatient surgery, no more than an hour. Well, surgery ended up being almost 6 hours. And I was living where there were no immediate blood relatives near me. And I'm very grateful for my family by love who stepped in. And in my first marriage, it ended in domestic violence. And I don't want to get too emotional, so I'll just leave it there. And I will tell you that it ended with me just really, really, and hate is such a strong word, but that's what I felt. That's the emotion I felt towards my ex-husband, who's also the father of my children. as time went on and I began to learn the value, and remember, we talked about the value of forgiveness. As time went on and I began to learn the value of forgiveness, I forgave him. And I wasn't as evolved as I am now, realizing and understanding that forgiveness is for me. But I forgave him. There was a process. I had to go through some things, but I forgave him. We did not reconcile, but it reconciled our children. And we were divorced many, many, many years ago. Many, 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 many years ago. And as I was recovering from surgery, I had a need. I needed a human life. I needed a human body. I needed someone to go to the store for me, to help me to the restroom. I needed help. I needed help. There was a knock on the door, and it was my ex-husband. And he said, I was in the city and I told Joe is my son, for those of you who don't know. I told Joe that I would check on you because he was worried. And I cannot tell you how grateful I was for him. He was able to get to the store for me, provide me with some needed assistance, and get me over the hump. Now, way back when, in my mind, I would have never needed him for anything. For nothing. But because I was able to forgive him when I had a need, when I was in my most critical moment, it was him who got me through that particular moment that day. The point I'm trying to make to you is you don't know what's on the other side of forgiveness or unforgiveness. Can you imagine had I still had unforgiveness for him? Sometimes I just shudder when I think about how it could have impacted our children. And that incident resonates the most because it was the most recent. And he and I, we don't have that much interaction. We're cordial. But I was so grateful to God that I had the ability to forgive him. Because had I not, I probably wouldn't have even wanted assistance from him. And if you've ever had major surgery where they have to cut your body open, it's a very, very, I can't even think of a word for it. But I needed him. And I was able to get what I needed because I was able to forgive. So to bring it all home, if you can forgive, it will open the pathway to what it is you need. And I'll give you a third example. It was during one of the hurricanes. My son I had begun to have a stomach ache.